Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful Reading with Your Kids studios in the lovely neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We have a wonderful show for you today. A lot of times I make a joke about myself in my magic shows, talking about the fact that I had a lot of extra energy. We have a guest today who's going to be talking to us about kids who have lots of extra energy. She's the author of my Whirling, Twirling Motor. Her name is Miriam Saunders. We would be so very, very happy if you would visit readingwithyourkids.com/yummy. Readingwithyourkids.com/yummy. Go there and find out about the easiest way to snack smart and do good. We're talking about Love with Food. Love with Food helps you discover new, organic, all-natural, and gluten-free snacks delivered directly to your door every single month. And membership starts as low as $7.99 a month. And this is why we love Love with Food so much. Love with Food will donate a portion of the proceeds to help fight childhood hunger in the U.S. and all around the world. Love with Food donates to organizations like Feeding America and the Global Food Banking Network. So join us to help end childhood hunger one meal at a time. Visit readingwithyourkids.com/yummy to say goodbye to boring grocery store selections and to start snacking smart and doing good with Love with Food. Joining us on the line right now from Northern California, she is the author of a very important book called My Whirling, Twirling Motor. Please welcome to the show licensed marriage and family therapist, Miriam Saunders. Miriam, how are you?
Great. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm super excited because this is a topic that is very important to a lot of families, kids, and I joke about it because I think it was something I was gifted with, and it was certainly something that my son was gifted with, which is a lot of extra energy.
Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about My Whirling, Twirling Motor, and not only why you wrote it, but who specifically wrote it for?
Well, the story is about a little boy named Charlie whose motor drives him all day long to do things that get him into trouble. Mm-hmm. And at bedtime, when his mom tells him that she needs to speak with him, he assumes that it's to get in trouble one more time. But on this particular occasion, his mom surprises him, and instead of telling him everything he did wrong that day, she reads to him from a wonderful list, which is a list of everything she caught him doing right.
Awesome.
And he's so moved by the list that it causes him to settle down and wonder about all the wonderful things he might do tomorrow.
Yeah. You know, this is something, and, you know, I was going to say it's a technique, but it wasn't really a technique. It's something that I did, especially with my son, was because I would find myself a lot of times just always kind of correcting my son because he had all that extra energy. And it was an especially big issue when he was in middle school. And every time I would pick him up after school, I would look over and see him coming and see the teacher stomping right on after him. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to hear today? But I thankfully would, make sure that every couple of days we just sat down and talked about some of the really wonderful things that he did and really kind of focused on that. And it's something we can all use, no matter what age we are, but it's especially something that our kids who don't fit in, who don't learn in the traditional way. And I shouldn't even say traditional way. They don't learn in the way that schools would like kids to learn.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'm so glad to hear that your natural instinct was to recognize that you needed to fill your son's self-esteem bucket. Mm-hmm. I wrote this particularly with ADHD children in mind because that's my specialty as a therapist. And I have my own Charlie, only my Charlie is a girl. Sabrina is my daughter. She's 21 now, but when she was little, I didn't know she had ADHD, and this was before I became a therapist. I didn't know that everything that she was doing, quote unquote, wrong was a result of this motor that she had inside of her that she couldn't control. And it is so easy to focus on everything they're doing wrong because it frustrates us. They're difficult behaviors. They can be really exhausting children. But the problem is that if you're constantly focusing on everything they do wrong, they start to internalize that and really feel like they're bad kids. When most of the time this is behavior that is outside of their control, and they don't wake up in the morning thinking, how many wrong things can I do today to anger my parent or my teacher? They're frequently just as disappointed in themselves as you might be because of what they did. So recognizing that they do an equal number of right things during the day, we just don't usually make a big deal out of it. If they picked up their socks, or they took their plate to the sink, or they used please and thank you and were kind to their brother. It's not often things we catch them doing in the moment because they're just expected. And
I think and I know I certainly realized this, and I mentioned that the whole thing with my son and his extra energy, it became more of an issue when he moved from one school to another during the middle school grades. And the school that he had been at, he had been at since kindergarten, and so those teachers kind of knew him, and so his extra energy wasn't a surprise, and it seemed that they were easy, they were able to adapt to it in a way where it wasn't so much of an issue. And then when he went to this new school, which was just a wonderful school, it was more of a surprise to them. And it was more of an issue. And he was the same kid, but just in a different situation and with different people. And then suddenly now it was a problem. And I think we as parents need to remember to be advocates for our kids and to kind of sometimes help the professionals who are dealing with them kind of see them and understand that this is a kid. He does some things right. He's not always wrong. And, let's look at ways of adapting the surroundings to meet his needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it can be a very difficult thing to be a parent advocate because especially parents of kids that have difficult behaviors, ADHD, autism, they can often feel a certain amount of shame and failure as a parent. Their child is the one who's always getting in trouble. And a lot of other people look at them and think, well, if only you disciplined your child better, or if, you had a rigid bedtime, or my child would never do anything like that. It's just very misunderstood. And I think it's important for all of us to know that not only are the parents doing the best they can, but the kids are really doing the best they can most of the time. And to catch them doing it right can sometimes be the self-esteem build that they need to help them through those difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were going through these difficult times, one of the things that really kind of helped me change my outlook and also kind of helped my son change his outlook, there's an expert here in Massachusetts in the field of ADHD, Dr. Ned Hallowell. And he calls ADHD a gift.
Yes. He does. Well, it can be. People with ADHD have a tendency to really think outside the box, see things in different ways, notice things the rest of us don't notice. But when you're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole in a classroom, it's not necessarily feeling like a gift.
Yeah. Tell me what, and I love the fact that you've written my Twirling Motor because I think it's it's great for a lot of different audiences. It's great for parents. because I think again, just reading this, we read your book, and it's just a great way for parents to kind of sit back and go, yeah, my kid's not a monster.
Right.
He's just him, and I keep saying him because there's so many boys who are diagnosed with ADHD, but him or her, he or she, it's just them, and they're beautiful inside. And when they're when they're outside and they're running around and they're having fun and they're focused on and they found something that they're interested in, my goodness, they're so amazing to be with. I think it's a great book for kids who are struggling with all that extra energy, because it helps them kind of sit down and to see themselves as they are, really special people with a special gift. And I think it's really a wonderful book for kids who don't have all that extra energy, especially a sibling, so they can kind of sit down and start to understand what their sibling, what their classmate are going through.
Right. Yeah, that's my hope. I hope that it creates empathy in people that recognize their neighbor or their sibling or their son in Charlie, and also for kids that recognize themselves in him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest things, and it was an issue that we dealt with, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but there's big controversy about how do we what's the best way to deal with kids with all this extra energy? Is it through behavior? Is it through positive reinforcement? Is it change in diet? Is it exercise? Or is it drugs? Do you have a specific outlook yourself? And do you have thoughts about parents who don't want to go the drug route, and how they might, in addition just to reading my Whirling, Twirling Motor, how they might want to approach the issue?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, because there is a lot of controversy out there, and parents that do choose to medicate are often left to feel as though they're, putting their children on quote-unquote drugs. The protocol that's advised for the treatment of ADHD is a combination of medication and behavior therapy, but there are a lot of things that parents can do if they don't want to medicate their children. It's a highly personal decision. I recommend that people talk to their doctors about it and do their own research. I personally did medicate my daughter, and it worked wonders for her, and it really gave her a sense of what it felt like to be able to access the tools that she needed. She's 21 now, and she doesn't use the medication anymore. She's pre-vet in college, and she's really figured out her own coping mechanisms around her ADHD. But you mentioned other things like exercise, diet. There have been studies that show that things like exercise, yoga, a meditation practice, martial arts can also really help with especially the hyperactive and inattentive symptoms of something like ADHD. So it's a little bit of everything in the approach. But you have to find what works right for you and your child and your family.
Absolutely. And I love that idea of speaking. And I would suggest, really encourage families to have a long conversation with their physicians. Because I think a lot of times it's like, oh, what? Oh, let me check. Oh, yeah, we checked 5 of the 10 boxes here. So here's a prescription. Take, see you later. And I think it's a situation that requires an extended conversation with your physician, and maybe with a licensed marriage and family therapist, and some other people who have some insight into the issue.
Yes, speaking with a psychiatrist, maybe even who specializes in those types of medications, a psychologist who can do more extensive testing on, not only the ADHD, but what might be behind it. Those are all avenues to explore as well for parents that really want to be educated on the topic.
Really important. Was it one incident because there aren't a lot of licensed marriage and family therapists who have the time to sit down and write a children's book because it does take a lot of time. A lot of people don't think so. But it's a lot of work. Was it one particular incident that inspired you to write My Whirling, Twirling Motor?
Well, I actually started writing novels for children. So I have a couple of different middle grade and young adult novels that my agent are currently trying to sell. And the first one was about a boy with ADHD. And I never considered myself to be a picture book writer. And I happened to just be drinking my morning coffee, and this particular idea came to mind because the Wonderful List is an intervention that I give the parents that I work with. It's one of the first things I advise them to do, in fact. And I thought that, and I just penned it out and sent it to my agent. She sent it off to my publisher, and they bought it.
That's wonderful.
And, it was I almost think it was just meant to be.
Yeah, well, it's certainly needed, and the advice you give about just sitting down and taking the time to I knew an educator who used the phrase "catch someone doing good." We're always talking about catching kids doing something bad. If we put the same effort as parents, as teachers, if we put the same effort into catching our kids when they're doing something good, when they're being kind, when they're being helpful, when they're being thoughtful, and pointing that out to kids, that's really, really important and so very valuable, I think.
It's really powerful. Praise creates dopamine in the brain, and because it makes us happy to be praised. And dopamine is actually one of the neurotransmitters that the ADHD brain is lacking. And so by praising someone, especially with ADHD, not only are you helping to make them happy and fill their self-esteem, but you're also helping their brain to create the one very thing they're lacking that causes symptoms.
Wow.
So that's why I always advise praise over punishment. Punishment doesn't typically work with an ADHD kid in particular.
Yeah, because if you sit down and you take the time to analyze it, if a kid doesn't have control, then you're just punishing, and it's what are you going to do? How you can't. I don't think you can beat control into a kid. Not that anybody's out there beating them, but you can't continually punish. And if you're not getting results, you have to sit back and take a moment and say, well, let's try a different approach to this. This doesn't seem to be helping at all.
That's right. I like to use an analogy of a child who needs glasses. And if you take away their glasses and you get angry at them for not being able to focus on and read something, that doesn't make sense. They can't control that. They just can't see it. So someone with ADHD, it's a little bit like that.
Yeah. And I guess, too, it's one of those things, it's difficult for some parents because it's really hard. You can't take a blood test or an X-ray, and you can't just kind of look at something and go, oh, yeah, here's the ADHD thing right here, and we know it. It's more of, observations and dialogue, and that's why I suggest that those long conversations with the psychologists, with the physicians, and with the teachers are really important.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Although, and I do think that most parents, when they finally get that diagnosis, they could have told you, like, I knew it all along. There was just something a little bit unusual about my child. That's a lot of energy. That's
an awful lot of energy. And it takes, and it does, it takes a lot of energy. But one of the things I like to remind parents is, you're expending a lot of energy to save up that big nest egg so you can send the kids to that $70,000 a year college. And you're expending a lot of energy to drive them all around. You're expending a lot of energy to pay for dance class and for karate class and for the elite soccer team. So you're already expending a lot of energy. You expend a lot of, a little bit of that energy to catch kids doing good and to sit down and to just praise them and to, take the time to let them know how special they are and remind them all the wonderful things that they're doing. That's a really incredibly valuable investment of their time and energy.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, you have another book coming out kind of in the same vein, I think, My Wandering Dreaming Mind. Can you tell us a little bit about that and when we might expect it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is essentially sort of the girl version of this, because girls who are diagnosed with ADHD typically have the inattentive type. Of course, that's not always the case. My own daughter had combined type. But so this story follows the character whose wandering dreaming mind causes her to forget things and not pay attention, and the same sort of impact at the end of the day. She just winds up feeling really badly about herself because of all of the things that her wandering and dreaming mind has caused her to get in trouble over. And then in the same sort of way, her mom has a surprise for her. It's not the same intervention as Charlie's mom, but it's a nice way that she's left to think about herself at the end of the day.
That is awesome. Well, I want folks to be able to visit your website because in addition to information about the books, there's some great information about you and also some great resources for parents, teachers, and librarians. So tell us where folks can connect with you online.
I'm at several different places. So my author website is merriamsbooks.com. And then I have a professional website, which is my name, miriamsaunders.com, for anybody who's looking for parent help with their ADHD child. I work over Skype. And then, yes, I have another website called anovelmind.com where parents can search for over 500 books, children's books that deal with characters that are grappling with mental health issues. So if you have a 12-year-old with anxiety and you want to find a book that they might relate to, you can search on that and you probably find something.
What a wonderful resource. We always talk about how valuable it is to not only to read to kids to help them improve their vocabulary, but to start these really, really important and oftentimes very difficult conversations. And if we're talking to our kids about a situation that a character in a book is going through, it's a lot easier than sitting down and saying, okay, son, daughter, we know that you're having this trouble. Let's talk about it. It's just a lot less threatening to sit down and talk about a character in a book that might be going through those same kind of issues. And like magic, sometimes light bulbs go off and they can, kind of relate it back to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a much safer, easier approach. It's a softer landing to talk about some difficult issues.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited. The name of the book is My Whirling, Twirling Motor. It's a great resource for every family, especially families whose kids have a little bit of extra energy, whether you're reading it to that kid or to the siblings, or maybe even sitting down and reading it with their teacher to help their teacher remember that because sometimes the teachers need that help too, just to be reminded that, maybe you might get a little bit more positive outcomes if we deal a little bit more positively and find ways to catch our child doing good than always catching them doing the wrong thing.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Teachers need that too.
Yep. We've been talking tonight to the author, Miriam Saunders. Miriam, thanks so much for being on a show tonight.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful show, and I appreciate being on it. Thanks again.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be coming to us all the way from Singapore. She is the author of 2 great books, Open and also A Boy's Wayang Adventures. Her name is Eva Wong Nava. She will be here. We hope you will be here too. Hey, if you're the author of a great children's book, it doesn't matter if you're living here in the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Singapore, or wherever you might be in the world. We would love to have you as a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Being a guest in the Reading with Your Kids podcast, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you a chance to tell the world about your fantastic books. The show has been downloaded to hundreds and hundreds of countries all over the world. We've been downloaded to every single continent on the earth, including Antarctica. I am not kidding you, including Antarctica. It really is a fun way to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. And it does not cost a thing. It just costs a little bit of your time. All you need to do is go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the contact button, let us know about your great book. We'll let you know the next easy steps. Hey, we want to thank Miriam Saunders today. Be sure to check out my Whirling, Twirling Motor. Learn more about this whole ADHD thing and how we can support every single kid to be the person they are meant to be. We also want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you find your podcast. We're available everywhere. Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. Everywhere you find podcasts, you will find the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We also want to thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking through the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.